Hey everyone, I'm here for the TFT patch 17.2 rundown. I know Mort usually does these, but since he's on sabbatical, the team decided that it was really valuable to keep that level of transparency and communication open. So if you don't know me, my name is Tim, or Truexy, and I have been the live balance lead for the past few sets. So I'll be going over 17.2, and it's a big one. Right, so something I want to do is kind of go over the patch goals every single time. I'm not going to do the morning meta rundown, so this is going to be my version of that. So the main goals for 17.2 is we kind of noticed that there was a lot more we could add to the set mechanic, and that people were just kind of missing that game-to-game variance that encounters had. So this is going to be a really systems-focused patch. We're bringing encounters back. There's going to be new god blessings. There's going to be a big systems update to econ and stuff like that. And the goal here is that not only in 17.2, but maybe even in 17.3, is that we're really going to try and beef up that set mechanic to really be godlike, right? There's going to be a lot more variance, a lot more things that feel impactful to your game without overly warping it, right? And on to the balance points. It's going to be more on a economy and a power deflation side right now. We see that combat is still a little bit too fast, which happens when there's a lot of econ in the game. There's a lot of 3-star 4 costs in the game, more than we would like. Some of that is augments, some of that is econ, some of that is god blessings. But overall, we're going to be taking a hit at that as well. This only isn't going to come in 17.2, but probably a little bit more in 17.3. And then finally, we have these narrow line selections, which kind of stem from a lot of different issues. But we've seen in past sets that on 2-1 or early in the game, when you get a really powerful emblem or augment or artifact that dictates your whole game, that's really not fun, right? To boil it down, it's like if you pan around on 2-1 and you kind of know what everybody's going to do, it's really just not that enjoyable of an experience. And we're going to be hitting that pretty hard here. And I expect, again, more things to happen in 17.3. So emblems are going to get hit, augments are going to be hit, artifacts are going to be hit, and then we're going to be working on that narrow tank line selection at the end of the game because there's only like 3 or 4 real tank options. That's going to be something we're going to address in 17.3. As I touched on before, the system changes. All the opening encounters from set 16 are going to be coming back, except for a few high inflation ones. So Scuttle Puddle is not going to be coming back. Reckoner's Arena, the one that gave a bunch of gold whenever somebody got eliminated, that's not coming back. Overall, expect that same pool to come back. And then we have a few new encounters. Again, these are less inflationary, but I think are fun twists. Double duplicators, getting 2 duplicators. Artifact Anvil, not at 2-1, but on 3-3. So you get to play the beginning of your game and then adapt to what you get. Stage 3 augments. All your augments going to come on stage 3. Reroll start, everyone starts with 8 free rerolls. You can decide when to use them, at the beginning of the game or at the end of the game. And then cheaper levels, this is going to trigger at stage level 4. Every level after 4 will cost 2 less, so we're going to adjust those leveling breakpoints and see if people can cook with that. And then just a minor thing here, we upped the prismatic rate for set 17 because there were no encounters. Now that we have encounters like prismatic first, prismatic last, stuff like that, we can just revert them back to the way they were in set 16. Loot changes. The big one here is that guaranteed reforger for 7th and 8th was actually a bug that we're fixing. Our intent was that there was no reforger for the comeback mechanic. It was just going to be those item anvils and those better Pengu offerings. So that's going to hit those emblem augments and that guaranteed ability to kind of tailor exactly what you want. Then beyond that, part of our deflation system, average loot for stage 1 to 3 is going to be decreased. This is mainly going to be taken from those low item high econ games. Those low item high econ games are just going to have a couple less gold, so you snowball a little bit slower. And that power is going to be in the encounters and in the set mechanic. The God Armory, this is where you have that 4-7 thing with 3 items or 2 items or 1 items and 12 gold. We think it's close in balance, but it doesn't need to be 12 gold, just 10 gold. And that's going to be a trend you're going to see throughout this whole patch, which is just going to be a couple gold here. So things still stay relatively balanced, but a couple gold from a lot of places is going to go a long distance. So the God boons. These are going to be the 4-7 augments for each god. The Carol one, we're just reworking. A Radiant item 1 was kind of over budget for that space. And the random, like, hey, pick a random item and become Radiant just wasn't that fun. And it was often really frustrating. So we're switching it to a more consistent version. It's kind of like Item Collector, the past augment, where for each completed item, so not artifacts, not psionic items, not radiance. Each unique completed item, your team gets stats. Echo's Anomaly. The tank one is really good. The rest are not so good, so some balance here. Double mana, and the caster one was a little bit too much true damage, so just tapping it down. The other two were just not up to the standards of other roles because they take an item slot, so we're just buffing up the stats a lot. Thresh's Boon was one of the worst performing boons, simply because it's like really slow, right? It can have the highest cap if you live a lot, but if you're going to be, 1 or 2 lives, it's really doing nothing for you. One of those reasons is that it doesn't roll until after one combat, but now when you click it, you're going to get one roll. We buffed some other odds as well, buffed some other outputs. And the thing we have nerfed was the 2/4 costs, which one was just way better than the other options, and 2 led to a lot of 3-star 4 costs. I think when we looked at our internal data and you sorted by gods and 3-star 4 cost, it wasn't actually RE, it was actually Thresh that was way above everyone else, and this is one of the reasons. And then finally, Yasuo's, the 2 hex option was kind of better than the 3 hex option by a lot, just because you got so much gold, tapping it down. Here are the new god blessings, so these are the offerings you get on like 2/5, 3/5, stuff like that. The goal here is kind of just adding interesting choices that are not just gold or XP or items, right? So gods like Ahri and Kayle are going to get different changes. Varus is going to get some. I think Soraka is one who didn't get a lot this patch, but I would imagine we would do more in upcoming patches to make Soraka feel more exciting. Ahri, gold every turn, 1 gold for the rest of the game. Divine Investment, some increased interest and some extra gold. Chest of Greed, it's going to be that splitters thing where you gain a small amount of gold, and then based off how many people pick it, you split that gold pot. So you could get a lot of gold if no one ever takes it. Kayle, some spin-offs of item things, which is 1, get a random component of the next item you create. So you get a lot more control there. Craftsmanship, gain 2 reforgers. Every time you use a reforger, you get gold. So kind of giving that like randomness vibe and econ into items. And Anvil Transformation, which is kind of an old augment. Whenever you get a component, switch it to an anvil. Eve, this one is a little bit rarer, but it's still in that Eve realm of risk taking, which is gain less gold, so gain 3 gold. If you make it a top 4, you gain 30 gold. Soraka, this is just a small one we put in. I would expect we do more for Soraka later. At combat start, grant the ally who died first a big shield, kind of just beefing up your front line, kind of a spin on HP. And Thresh, I think Thresh is pretty fun, so we're just adding 2 more random options here to spice it up, which is 1, transfer all the 1 and 2 chaos champions on your board to runs of a random higher cost, stage 2 only. So hey, if your board is bad, see what happens, or if your board is good and you want to upgrade those 2 costs, 2-star 2 costs. Pandora's Seat, this is going to be part of our 3-star 4 cost thing. Pandora's bench has been one of the biggest defenders of 3-star 4 costs. For this set, we're going to take a break with it and move it into the God Blessings, so it's a little bit less common, and that gives us a chance to kind of nerf the output of it, so it's only going down to 2 bench slots. Should still be really good for like a God Blessing, but less of that persistent pressure of like, oh, we have to balance this around the augment. Varus, Ephemeral Reroll is one of the more fun ones. At the start of each round, if you don't have a free reroll, gain a free reroll. So kind of like that old trade sector augment. Star-crossed upgrade, the next 2, 3, 4 costs you see in the shop will be 2-star. Again, this is the first one you see. So if imagine you have 3, 4 costs in your shop, only the first one on the leftmost slot will be upgraded. And then Super Parting Gifts, the next time you select a God Pengus, so that round basically, gain an extra copy of the champion and 2 gold. And finally, for the God Blessings, these are the existing ones. I'm not going to read each one, but basically the gist here is that it's deflation. We saw that a lot of the best options were 1 Ahri, which is a ton of econ, and then just a bunch of inflation of items and spatulas and stuff like that we can really pull out just a tad. So Ahri, you see a lot of our outputs go down. Echo, we've removed the spatula. 1, because this kind of led to some pretty toxic games where everyone played for the same 2 or 3 comps. And the other reason was that, hey, we added this so that we could have some source of emblems with no encounters, but now that encounters are coming back, that gives us emblem ensemble, loot subscriptions, stuff like that can give you emblems in a better way. Some other nerfed ones, Evelyn's gold's going down, some cost is going down, increased for the 2-star 2 cost. Soraka's getting a little bit less gold. Yasuo's hexes are getting balanced a little bit better, right? The Cosmic Hack is giving more HP. The other ones are just a little bit too good, especially when upgraded, so we're nerfing that. All right, on to traits and champions. Big thing here for Anima is 2 points. One, it's really bad in double up and has this big modifier that if your partner wins, you get like close to no tech. Changing that, buffing it up so you can play that in double up now. But the other big thing for ranked is that Anima has been a really consistent engine generator, specifically at the 300 and 400 cash outs. 300 is the biggest offender where you kind of just don't have a big risk. You just lose a few rounds with a loss streak and get a really powerful item and then snowball from there. So we're adjusting it so that 300 tech, you do not get the tier 2 items, you get the tier 1 items, which are the champion specific Anima tech ones, a lot weaker. But if you want to get those powerful items, you really need to push to 400. For exact balance, we're just adjusting the tier 1 items slightly, making the Savage Slicer better on Briar because it's really bad. And Rocket Swarm is a bit too good on Jinx, but we're going to be buffing up Jinx later as you see. And the tier 2 items, the Annihilator, just one of the weaker tier 2 items along with Uru Blaster, so we're getting that to be more consistent and feel worthwhile for a tier 2 item. And Battle Bunny Crossbow, if you guys have seen this one, this is the, hey, if you get it on Xayah or Graves, it's like near auto win. So we're removing that interaction, making it so they can only stack 1 time per basic attack, basically doesn't affect any other champions besides Xayah and Graves. And that's going to be the nerf for that. And then Cyclonic Slicers is going to be a lot less damage. It was kind of a do everything item. It was a good tank item, a good fighter item, a shred item, and a damage item. I think it was doing too much for stage 2. And then we're leaving the rest. So we think the tank items are really good, but if we take out that 300 tempo option, it's going to be a little bit riskier to get there. Arbiter, a lot of text, I'm not going to read it, but we have a lot of data, a lot of exploration, a lot of gameplay with Arbiter. And this is, for a complex trait like this, kind of just expected, where we're going to be kind of clamping the outputs a little bit, where the good ones are going to be a little bit less good and the bad ones are going to be less bad, so that you feel like you have more freedom to really cook and choose without feeling like you baited yourself without knowing the stats. Smaller trait changes. Brawler is the worst tank trait in the game, so some champions and the trait are going to get buffed up. Challenger, we don't really want a 4 and 5 Challenger comp to be consistent. But right now, getting an Emblem and playing 4 or 5 feels like kind of a bait. So making this a little bit more worthwhile if you actually chase it and have a cool, fun comp. And then Mech, the stats, obviously this is going to help 6, but 3 and 4 as a standalone are really, really rare. I am filming this on a Friday, and I know there is an Urgot comp that is coming up that plays 3 or 4 Mech. But we still think it's a healthy change where you can flex around Urgot, Asol a little bit more. And as you see, there's a base Galio change as well. So really giving you more options that are not just tunneling you into 6 mech. Psionic, the 4 piece isn't really played. Everyone plays the 2. The 4 is not that attractive, so we're bumping that up. Sona's going to get a buff as well later. And then Meeple 7, again, not overperforming, but kind of too good as an econ engine, and this is going to go with our Deflation Pass. It was really cool on the first patch, just giving a little bit too much gold. Final bit of traits. Stargazer, Xayah is one of the best comps in the game, but Huntress, surprisingly, was one of her worst performing constellations. We just want to bring that up to par, and if we need to balance Xayah and that comp around it, we will. Fountain, going back to that narrowness in comp selection on stage 2, it feels really bad when you open up Stargazer and you see the Fountain, and you're like, I can't play Xayah. And with mana regen, there's not really a number that we could put it to that Xayah would be really, really good or playable on. So we're going to temporarily disable it. I'd expect it to come back slightly reworked so that it can still be Lulu's de facto constellation, but also can be a little bit better and playable for Xayah. Medallion, we've all seen the TF comp. It kind of just deletes your tank in like 1 second. Going to lower the ceiling of that a little bit. Mountain, this is meant to be a buff. So the 3 and the 4 piece are going to give you more stats. And this is mainly so that if you flex into this on stage 3 or stage 4, with just a normal Stargazer comp, Nunu, Jax, and whatever carry, you get more stats and more relevant stats faster, so you don't have to wait until there's emblems and stuff to really kick online. So small buff later, but you get more power early. And Timebreaker is the other big engine besides Anima that we're going to be looking at this patch. Essentially, we're going to be switching the 2 and the 3. Right, the 2 before, one reroll round wasn't like something crazy, but the opportunity cost was really, really low. So it kind of made it that if you were going to ever loss streak, it was very easy to fit this in, and then all the games felt really samey with Anima. So we're swapping them. The 2 is going to give you that Teamfight aura, pretty basic, kind of whatever, but still high value. But getting the 3 in is now going to give you that XP in those rerolls, and we've buffed it to kind of match. So specifically on stage 3 and stage 4, winning or losing with 3 Timebreaker in can actually give you really meaningful results as an engine. And for Timebreaker, we're going to be keeping the same. Now on the champions. So to preface here, kind of like a meta note, I'm filming this on Friday. These changes were locked on Wednesday. I would expect, this is no guarantee, but we've kind of seen a trend toward reroll comps at 1, 2, and 3, and kind of shifting away from 4 and 5 costs. Especially with encounters coming in giving a lot of gold, we wanted to be a little bit careful about buffing too many rerolls, but also careful about like overcompensating and then having it be a 5 cost meta or 4 cost meta. So depending on how the meta evolves over the weekend, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the changes here get adjusted before the launch patch on Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on where you are. Or maybe we're going to shift more into the 4 and 5 costs. We've kind of felt a little bit weaker on that end. But anyways, back to the champions. Caitlyn, her missile headshot size is going to, her headshot missile size is going to increase with damage. So if you're going to crit for 2k, you're going to see a really cool missile. Cho'Gath kind of just isn't stable as a tank early game and doesn't really scale that well. So we're going to make him feel a little bit better early game so that, hey, if you hit 2 Brawler with Rek'Sai and Cho'Gath, it's like a decent front line. And this is really small on his HP so that he can scale better. Ezreal, this looks like a really small buff as well, but a lot of it's going to be focused on that early game. So that AP scaler really helps when you're like low items on Ezreal. So this is hopefully he picks up a few more takedowns early, gets rolling a little bit easier, because we know that when he gets to that 60-70 takedown threshold, he is pretty good. Talon had a really big bug where he didn't benefit from Omnivamp. So you build BT on him, Hodge on him, and it was just bad. We're going to be fixing that. Obviously, that's a huge buff, and he was already one of the best 1 costs for like item holding, and so he's going to get a compensation nerf. Overall, I'd expect this to be a nerf to him since he wasn't overly reliant on Omnivamp. 2 cost, our main goal here is just buffing up the stuff that's not working. Gnar, great item holder for Xayah, but really not useful outside of that in any way. The spell damage is going to be going up a little bit at 3-star. Hopefully that makes him a little bit more enticing. I think this is really small because he does a lot of auto attack damage, but hey, this could maybe like consider if you have like 3 or 4 Gnars to go for this. Jinx, we just want to be more consistent as an item holder. We've seen her like succeed at 3-star anima things because anima is very strong, but as an actual like item holder and transition unit, she's just not great. Gragas similarly is just not that good. Getting buffed up, that should help Psionic. And then Melio again. Timebreaker's getting adjusted, Ezreal's getting adjusted, Melio's getting adjusted. We want this to actually feel like a comp you can play for combat power and not just an engine. 3 costs, same boat as 2 costs, stuff that just isn't working. Diana is kind of weak on all fronts. So she's getting a little bit of help everywhere. Shield, spell damage, and on hit. Basically, she just should feel closer as a bruiser unit. Lulu, one of the worst casters in the game, even regardless of what constellation you're on. She just gets a pretty sizable like 5 mana buff, which should make her a lot more consistent. She does splash a lot of damage everywhere. We are nerfing the medallion gold because the more she casts, the more gold she generates, and this was already probably one of the best ways to get her. Maokai, you compare him to the other 3 cost tanks, just isn't hitting that mark, especially at 3-star. Remember, this is pretty small because Brawler is also getting buffed, but hopefully moving him closer as another tank option. And then Misfortune is supposed to be one of the de facto 3 cost carries, and she is nowhere to be seen. So we're doing buffs here to Channeler and Replicator. We think Challenger is close. We're also buffing Challenger at 4 and 5, but this should be a nice DPS bump to get her competitive with the other 3 costs. And it just so happened that the last 2 3 costs in the alphabet are the 2 getting nerfs. But Samira, probably like an A tier comp right now. Really good with 2 tanky, and then kind of okay without 2 tanky. We've kind of seen comps show up with that. And then Victor has been the menace of the first patch. Sizable hit for Victor again at the 1 and 2 star, and then actually a real nerf at the 3 star. And then Samira we nerfed just because we're taking a lot of things down, and that she was going to be that consistent, same level as like S tier comp that we wouldn't want to be warping the meta around, so she's getting a hit there as well. For cost, I'm going to emphasize here, I think over the weekend, the trends we've seen, if they continue, that we might need to do more here before the patch launches. Specifically on the underperforming ones, stuff like Master Yi, stuff like LeBlanc could use some help, but for now, this is what we had locked. Quirky, getting a small bump up to be a more consistent AD threat. Galio, this is the unmech form. This isn't a huge buff. This is just to bring him a little bit more as a flex option, as a transition unit, so you can get into the final comp. But he should be slightly worse than the 2-star 4 cost, not unclickable. Nunu is obviously the best 4 cost tank in the game right now. His stun is longer than normal. His mana is a little bit lower than it usually is, so we're bringing that to par. And so we hopefully can get away from this kind of unhealthy meta where everybody's tunneling toward Nunu and feels like if I don't hit Nunu, I can't play the game. Tahm Kench, twofold, we're taking some econ out of his passive and putting it into his tankiness. Again, Brawler is getting buffed. I'm saying this again. So all the Brawlers are going to be really good. So hopefully you can play this as a real tank line and not as just a pure engine generator. Gold out of the game, tankiness into the game. Seems good. 5 costs, same thing as 4 costs. I imagine 5 costs right now are very utility indexed and don't feel that great to itemize. I think that's something we're definitely going to be looking at, and it's kind of hurting a lot of the late game like carry options, right? And that's why reroll has felt so good. It's like for 3-star 3 cost reroll, you kind of just 3-star more units. For 4 and 5 costs, you don't really feel good itemizing some of these units. Jin being one of them, granted he's next to Xayah, right? But he's always felt like second fiddle, which doesn't feel right, even for a champion with an aura. Vex has felt above the bar slightly. She's falling off a little bit as the patch goes on, but she has a bunch of weird things with her, like she's 8 range instead of like a normal range, which gives her a lot of extra uptime compared to other units. And her damage is just a little bit high. Granted, like, think about it, this is a pretty small nerf for her because a lot of her damage is from auto attacks. And then Graves, there's a lot of exploration here, and I think we're going to have to do more work with him. These upgrade trees keep changing, honestly, daily. But for now, the gist here is that the melee frame is getting nerfed. Specifically, the stuff that like snowballs really, really hard, which is, hey, grab booster after, it says grave booster. Grab booster, you kill one unit, and you kind of just chain and kill a bunch of things. And then we're buffing the marksman frame, which is kind of the most underplayed and weakest version, so that it does a little bit more damage. That's champions. Again, this is what is happening before the weekend. We'll see what the picture looks like after the weekend. And also, I've said we have new augments. So these are things that might have been previewed on PvE, but we're introducing stuff that the trade augments and hero augments that people really like. Those are going to be coming over the next couple patches. So there's a Mordekaiser one that was shown on PvE, which is he gets this big aura around him. He kind of becomes a big dot champion. There's Self-Destruct, the Gragas one. He becomes a magic fighter. He has a big boom around him. And then Leona, this wasn't shown on PvE, but Leona with Arbiter is always a fun combination. She becomes an attack fighter. She dashes around. This is a pretty short dash. It's going to be like 2 hexes, so she's not going to your backline. But there's a lot of cool things you can cook there. Heart of the Swarm is a prismatic augment, and this is going to unlock the prismatic trait for Primordian, right? And this is a very, very cool, very, very unique augment where it says, hey, you can 3-star anything now for Primordian, and it's going to give you more power. And if you 3-star 6 things and get level 10, you unlock the Apex Primordian, which is a big, really cool summon that's going to have Prismatic's level of power. I think it's close to like a 3-star 4 cost. So that's a really cool thing to try out if you get it. And then finally, we're going to have that trickle of trade augments over the next couple patches. Divine Amendment. Wow, I cannot talk. It's because the video is so long. Arbiters add a second effect to their law, so you get to cook up even more. As I mentioned before, Pandora's is getting disabled. We disabled a few more problematic augments in the micro patch, and that has reduced some of the 3-star 4 costs, but this is the last thing to hit. And these are the adjusted augments. Again, there's going to be a trend here where a lot of the augments that kind of locked you in or like dominated the meta are getting hit. Specifically, Econ and Reroll are things that I think were outstanding. So AFK is getting hit, at what cost is getting hit. This Meepsy hero augment or champion augment was one of the best in the game. Shockingly, it was kind of just doing absurd amounts of damage. Bronze for life, so Victor's getting hit again. Earlier learnings going down, so it's much weaker as an early starting augment. It's a scaling augment. Expedition's getting nerfed. Forge and Strength and those artifacts are getting nerfed. Golden Gamble exclude from each other. Hedge Fund nerfed. Hero Grab Bag nerfed. New Recruit is getting a rework where it's no longer going to give the duplicator. It's going to give you 3-4 cost champions instead. No Scout, no Pivot nerfed. On a Roll, Patience is a Virtue. All these like heavy, like overstated econ augments that are giving it informer rerolls are getting nerfed. Prismatic Ticket nerfed. Reach for the Stars getting buffed. It's going to be a little bit tankier so that Jax can really like ramp up over time. Savings account nerfed. Slightly magical roll. Gold nerfed. And Solar Plate max HP nerfed for those like super units like Galio or Mighty Mech. Finally, wow, that's a lot of augment changes. Poppy's going to get her spell damage buffed in her champion augment. The tower is getting nerfed. Twin Guardian's getting nerfed. Two Tanky getting nerfed. Just small outlier combat augments, but the biggest hit here is going to be less econ in the game, so less econ augments power, because if we didn't nerf them, they'd be insane. Emblems. This is something that people have been complaining about for a while on the patch. So emblems are going to be kind of like a moving target between sets. I know last set when verticals were really weak, emblems got really, really good stats to entice you to play differently and flex around them. We kind of kept that for this patch, but the trait webs are a little bit more valuable when you get emblems. We're going to take them down, and then some of them are just overstated. Darkstar, I think, unlocks a lot of very good trait webbing. We've seen that Zyajin comp. You're going to take down the raw 80 AP you're going to get, because most of the time you're going to be playing this with 4 or 6, which is a ton of AD and AP. Rogue just gives a lot of damage amp and an extra Edge of Night to your team, which is a ton of value. Shepherd Emblem itself probably is an OP, but unlocks 7 Shepherd, which is going to be where most of the power is, and we don't want to nerf the 7 Shepherd summon. We'll be nerfing the Emblem. And Space Groove, probably the most common comp in the game. We're kind of shifting the stats around to be more useful. Mana Regen was great for backliners. Space Groove doesn't need more backliners, it kind of wants more frontline. We're going to shift to the HP. We're also going to nerf the Groove duration on cast, so the Emblem is getting nerfed. And then most importantly, we're putting an ICD on it, so stuff like Riven can't just chain it together and it constantly heal. There's going to be a lot of downtime here, which is a pretty big hit to the Emblem. Timebreaker, we're changing Timebreaker so that the 3 and the 4 are more valuable, so nerfing the Emblem a little bit is just for compensation. Vanguard Emblem is probably one of the other best emblems. Way too much HP, and a very, very tanky emblem makes it very, very hard to overcome this early game, so making that a little bit weaker early. And in Voyager, we've been nerfing this a bunch of times, just has way too good of an aura. Now the Omnivamp one was way too good, so we're taking that out, or nerfing it. Artifacts, not as big of an outlier. I think there's actually a lot more weak artifacts than we'd like, but touching the top end, which is this Ari's Aura Foxfire, too much damage, really consistent as an AP option. You can just kind of click it and you just do way more damage, which we don't really like generic things like that for artifacts. Dawncore has been bad for multiple sets, so we're finally giving it back some mana regen, so it's a little bit more self-sufficient. Echo's Patience, again, this is one of those like artifacts that really elevates the mecha comp. We're nerfing this. We're removing Kale's Exaltation. There's just a lot of bugs with it with permanent rating items. We're just going to take it out of the game. Titanic Hydra is, kind of getting nerfed for the existence of Graves and Fiora and a bunch of these really, really like great users in the set, and it's been very good for a while. Thresh's Lantern, just underperforming. Yasuo's Bladework, underperforming. These are just small buffs here. And 3-star forecast. Some of these were just mistuned at the start of the set. It happens. The Mighty Mech, when he was transformed, was probably close to 3-star 5 cost because of 90% durability. That's going down to 60, and it's going to do way less damage. So he's not going to one-shot your team and be unkillable. Aurelian Soul is really good in both forms. We're just taking that down. LeBlanc, passive damage is also going down. These are like the 3 highest win rate ones that are kind of above our frameworks. So they should feel a little bit more beatable in those rare games that do happen, but still really good. And then Tom Kench was buffed earlier. He was the one really bad 3-star forecast. Bug list, I'm not going to go through every single one because this is 3 pages. But I'll leave them up on the screen for a little bit. There's some funny ones here where like you can't steal someone's Zed from Pilfer. Aurelian Soul's movement bug with the Mighty Mech is changed. Let's see, what else is interesting here? Probably nothing too crazy here. I think Lucky Gloves Invader Zed had a bug where Zed would have a bunch of Radiant items. That's been fixed. Fixed some double up bugs. But overall, that's the patch. It was a lot. But I would go out, play, experience all the new things, and I would expect a lot more changes in 17.3 as well. That's probably going to be our more champion-focused patch now that we get our systems in a good spot. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the initial launch of Space Gods. So go out and play it, and until next time.